Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Syphon Filter 3. I played it on the PS5 via the PS Plus thing. I guess you could play it on an emulator or a PS2 or even a PS1 if you got it. So let's get into the story. You play as Gabe as well as several other characters, including Leon. And this is like those old TV shows where they used to have that one clip show episode where it'd be a bunch of memories, and then they would finally get to the actual point at the very end and progress a little bit. But in this case, the progression is literally the end of this trilogy anyways. And it's like a few missions, doesn't take that long to wrap it up. But like you're playing a bunch of missions about how like Gabe and Leon met, Gabe and some other character met, some other random dude who's been there for a minute, but not like super important. And just like, it was kind of weird. There's a bunch of stuff that really didn't have a ton to do with the previous two games up to now. It's a bunch of like prequel stuff, really. And I gotta say, at first I was like, okay, this really isn't doing much for me because it's not doing much for the story as we know it and have it. And some of those missions are a little more interesting than others, and by a little I mean a lot, and some of them vary wildly in like the length of time they take. So I'm gonna say, like, I enjoyed the wrap-up of the story, but the other stuff in between was really hit or miss. Onto the audio, the voiceover work is what you expect from the Syphon Filter games to this point. It's not necessarily the greatest thing you're ever gonna hear, but it is better than you might expect. I think the music in this game has the most personality out of the games thus far, but it's still not something I'm really gonna remember. And the sound effects are overall a bit better. Some of them are still very much what you'd expect, but I do appreciate how basically every gun does sound different, and they added some new weapons that have their own sound, so I did like that. I think they're new weapons, I don't remember them from the previous games. Let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and it's still a third-person shooter. There's a couple of sneaky bits, but like not whole sneaky bit missions that really didn't work as well as we'd like them to. It's still very much mission by mission, but it's all framed in this like congressional hearing style where like they're interviewing one person and they're telling their story, then you'll go on to the next character who's telling their story. You might see two different sides of the story, Gabe's side and Leon's side or something like that. But it's still very much mission to mission. Each mission has its own objectives. Some of those objectives may change a little bit. From a gameplay standpoint, I really took a different approach playing this one than I did in the first, and then I started changing the bit in the second, and this one I changed a lot. I basically walked around crouched almost the entire time because then I was automatically in the kneeling position for shooting, because once again you have the target and danger meters, and I found that when you're walking around like that you just immediately crouch and you can more quickly lock onto your enemies, and overall I took less damage and died as less frequently, so that worked. In some ways, it's a really cool gameplay mechanic, but at the same time, it really slows down the action of the game. But I made it work this time. I definitely got more used to the way you aim and the way you lock on and how to use that, as well as the weird movements in this game, which I guess we will now get into the controls. Because this game controls exactly like the previous, and you'd think going into this I would know how to do this having played the other two just earlier this year, but no, it was totally foreign to me once again, even though it controls the same, and I did get used to it eventually. And I did have the same problem in Syphon Filter 3 as Syphon Filter 2, where I would hold down the button to fire, or I'd press the button to fire, and it wouldn't always react as quickly as I would like, and that was once again frustrating, and there were a few times where that got me killed, just flat out. It was very frustrating still because you're sitting there holding the button to start firing and it's like 1, 2, oh, fire now. Okay, got it. He's already been standing there firing at me, but you're just gonna do it now after I've pressed the button for a couple of seconds. And one of the reasons that's the problem is your body armor is like paper thin apparently, because they just burn through it, so that gets frustrating. Now let's move on to the graphics and visuals, and the first thing I'm gonna say is it's the best looking Syphon Filter game. It's still not great looking, it's still a PlayStation 1 game, it's 24 years old or thereabout. But I will say all the characters are much more detailed than they were previously, and I do appreciate it, and I noticed it more this time, that like some of the characters really do have different animations, and I think that's impressive. The way they walk or run is different. They also give you a bunch of outfits again, and there is more detail in there than there have been in previous games, which is really cool. The world itself looks slightly better, like the different levels and whatnot, they look slightly better than they would in Syphon Filter 1 and 2, and I point those out because these all came out on the PlayStation 1, but your environments look far worse than the characters, quite frankly. They stand out as looking not great, whereas the characters look considerably better, and that's mostly me because I have played the previous two recently. What I will say I appreciate is there's a lot more variety in enemy. Each level kind of has their own enemies. There's a good variety in the levels. I think they're generally well mapped out and a little more easily navigated than in the previous games, although there are a couple where you have no map and that kind of sucks. I do want to go back to the gameplay just real quick. One thing I felt that they changed massively was that they nerfed the shotgun. That thing used to be sick. Like, the shotgun used to have a legitimate range and a more realistic range, and now at a distance, you can hit your enemy, but it could take like 6, 7, 8 shots. I'm not even joking about that. Whereas up close and personal, it'll still be a 1 or 2 shot weapon, but at distance, they definitely nerfed it. Okay, so let's get into the wrap up. And I actually never played Syphon Filter 3 when it initially came out, so this was my first playthrough, and I enjoyed it. I think the story was weaker, and the fact that they nerfed the shotgun was sad for me, and the issue with the firing is still frustrating. But if you played the first 2 games, why not play the third is what I could say. I think it is the weakest of the 3 to this point. I don't necessarily have a huge problem recommending it, and if you can download it for free, then download it for free. It's not super expensive, so I don't have a problem recommending it on that side either, but I can say it's a little more niche. Okay, so in the comments down below, has there ever been a game where you've played multiple games in the franchise a long time ago and then come back to it and played like the third in the series? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one. Now I have notes. Let's see what my other notes say. Notes.